Thank you. Guys, this is the Breaking Boundaries panel. I'm your host, Alex Runyon. I'm here today with some very awesome filmmakers from our region, and I'm going to read their bios because they're very impressive. And when I read them, I got imposter syndrome and thought maybe I shouldn't talk to these people because they're very fancy. But then I remembered that they're also very nice, which is awesome. Okay. Do you guys like this so far? Cool. This is my work computer. Don't tell my boss. Okay. Our first panelist is Elaine McMillan Sheldon. She's an Academy Award nominated and Emmy and Peabody Award winning filmmaker. Applause break. Elaine is the director of 2 Netflix original documentaries, Heroin and Recovery Boys, that explore America's opioid crisis. She has been named a Creative Capital Awardee, Guggenheim Fellow, a USA Fellow by United States Artists, and one of the 25 new faces of independent film by Filmmaker magazine. Her latest film, King Cole, premiered at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival. McMillan Sheldon was raised in West Virginia and lives in Knoxville, Tennessee. Clara Lehman founded the creative studio Coat of Arms in 2010 and serves as its director, producer, and writer. Applause break. Coat of Arms works with Fortune 100 and 500 brands and is a Webby, Emmy, Cannes. Oh my God, guys, remember when I said the thing about Best Boy? Don't ask me about Cannes. She's a Cannes Lion awarded studio. She wrote, directed, and produced her first feature documentary, Born in a Ballroom, in 2019. Her second feature documentary, O Pioneer, received a Cinequest Film Festival Audience Award, the Rome International Film Festival Jury Award, and the Appalachian Studies Association 2024 Jack Sparrow Documentary Award. She wrote and directed the multi-award-winning animated series entitled Lullaby Theories. Her work has played at over 50 film festivals worldwide, including Cannes, Doc Edge, Doc NYC, SX South by Southwest, I know that one, and Tribeca. Clara received the West Virginia Beacon Award in 2020 for her community and filmmaking work. She serves as the chair of the West Virginia Community Development Hub and on the executive board of the Helvetia Restoration and Development Organization. Give it up for Clara. Tisha Bumgarner is a filmmaker, scholar, and professor. Applause break. She teaches narrative film and documentary filmmaking at Marshall University. Since writing and directing her first feature film, Meadow Bridge, in 2017, she has co-directed and starred in the experimental short Becoming Annette, 2020, co-created the web series Quarantine Life, we know that was 2020, served as the first assistant director for Occupational Hazard 2021, and directed by Ursula Ellis. Tisha told me that I did not have to read everyone's bios because she said that sucks. Tisha's the best. Everyone who's here is the best. But that was very cool of her, so I'm going to stop there. She's made a lot of things, and they're awesome. You're welcome! And last but not least, Jillian Carney Howell. When Jillian was 7 years old, Santa Claus brought her a Barbie video camera, and her love of filmmaking was sparked. Applause break. After graduating from UNCW's film program, the Putnam County, West Virginia native relocated to Los Angeles in 2017 to begin working for the Walt Disney Company, where she has been part of the production team for Frozen 2, Raya and the Last Dragon, Strange World, Wish, and several theme park attractions and traditional hand-drawn shorts. As a filmmaker, her passion lies deeply in sharing Appalachian stories through an empathetic, optimistic, and collaborative lens, most recently through documentary work. Her short documentary, Zane, on her childhood best friend, has won some local awards. And Zane is here. And played in New York and Florida. She's currently in production for what she thinks will be her first feature film, a documentary on the small town of Thurman, West Virginia, where the population is 4. Since 2020, she has been running the social media project Shine On West Virginia to demystify West Virginians working in the arts and entertainment fields and uplift previously uncelebrated voices. She is excitedly looking forward to rebuilding and expanding that project in the new year. Give it up for Jill and everybody else on the panel. So we're going to operate this as a Q&A, but I am the host, so I have several questions that are going to get answered first. And then I'll invite you guys up to ask some of your own questions. Is that cool? Did you guys know about that? Will you answer my questions? Okay, they're in. My first question, you guys, anybody can answer, but I don't know. Tisha looked at me in the eyeballs, so she has to go first. What does breaking boundaries mean to you as a filmmaker? And can you share a moment that you realized you were pushing boundaries as a filmmaker? You or anybody else?
Oh,
Jillian.
I don't know what I'm going to say yet. I don't know what I'm going to say yet. So breaking boundaries for me is that growing up in Appalachia in West Virginia, I didn't see, I should also preface too, I graduated high school in 2013 and knew what I wanted to do from a very young age, but didn't see a lot of representation in Appalachia as a whole. And what I found out is that it was there, it was just underneath the surface, and it just took a lot of networking and collaboration and conversations to find it. I did know about Elaine, however, and that was like groundbreaking for me. So I think when someone else breaks the boundary first, then it can kind of like inspire you to say like, oh, well, maybe I could do that too. And I think like, for me, breaking the boundary of what I think I'm capable of, because it's funny, we were literally all talking about how we all have imposter syndrome and how we're like, why us? Like, you want us on this? And so I think you have to constantly be like rewriting the boundary of who you think you are.
Thanks, Jillian. That was a great answer. Elaine, since you were mentioned, do you want to bring up a time that you realized that you were pushing boundaries as a filmmaker, or tell me a little bit about what breaking boundaries means to you?
Sure. Well, I feel as if my orientation of filmmaking is so different after 12 years of doing it, because I felt like such an underdog in the beginning, in the sense of like I had no relationships and no work. And so I just was like, okay, I'm going to put the same work ethic that was taught to us here in West Virginia and all other jobs and relate that to filmmaking. And I'm going to make a bunch of films and hopefully someone will care. But most of the time, nobody cares what you're doing. And it's up to you to care enough about it to see it through the end. And then hopefully on the other side of it, when you finish it, there's an audience there. And now I feel like, I've done that for 12 years. And now I just feel really lucky. The boundary breaking in my own, I realized I had set a boundary in my own mind. And I feel really lucky to be from this place. I think in the beginning I felt like I needed to, we all feel beaten down by these stereotypes and blah, blah, blah. And like this was like so much that was motivating me. And I think now like what we need to do is sort of steel ourselves up and like remind ourselves of the beauty of this place. And so that's the new boundary in my mind I've broken, is it's not so much about convincing anyone from the outside that our stories are worthy or that we are worthy and you should watch our films, but like how do we actually build up ourselves so that, parachute journalists and others that come in, we can be like, you know what, that's not the whole story. And so that's, I think that mentally there's a boundary breaking in my mind right now, and me trying to figure out, because the industry isn't here necessarily, but I've also been in the places of the industry and it's very fleeting. I mean, what we have here is very grounded. So I'm trying to navigate that at this stage.
Thank you. You ready for us, Tisha?
Now I'm ready. Thank you so much. I think that, I grew up in southern West Virginia, and then I ended up in LA and all these things, and I didn't think much of this place as like a place. And then when I was there, that's where I kind of like gained interest in telling stories of West Virginia and knowing I wanted to come back to West Virginia. But also I think part of where I like to push these boundaries or try to break them is actually by teaching and trying to be on that level of trying to amplify like new voices in cinema, and we have that now. I'm very grateful for how Marshall has like supported this new filmmaking program, and being a part of that has been just really like, oh, I feel it when I'm like on set with students and they're getting to see filmmaking as filmmaking. It's not just video production. It's not just like broadcast journalism or, you know, what was kind of offered before. And I think I didn't have that, you know, growing up here. And so I'm very grateful to be able to, have that opportunity now to kind of push that in a way of breaking boundaries and being grateful enough to, you know, get to make my own work. And then this past summer, I got to like hire my former students on my current project. And I don't know, it's just like really nice to be able to be home and being able to make films, because I think like what's been said, like here, it isn't like industry like specific. So we have to find ways to like do the work. And I think we're getting there. And of course, I'm grateful for the Film Office and Dave Lavender, who's probably out there because St. Lavender's everywhere. And having that support and being able to do this, I think, is breaking boundaries like never before here in West Virginia.
Just like as a personal note, when you were talking about teaching film, my niece is in college at Marshall right now, and her name is Hannah, and she took your class. And she sent me her essay that she wrote about the M. Night Shyamalan movie, Old. And I have never read anything that she ever wrote before. And I was like, wait, you like think about the stuff that you're watching and like what it means. And you like, I could cry. You like taught her about that, you know? That's really cool. She's smart and like a person, but you like instilled that in her, and that was really special. So like, I don't know. Y'all are cool. You're doing great. Do you need that from me? I know you don't need that from a local comedian, but you're doing great. I have another question that maybe Clara could head off for us if you're willing to do that.
I am willing.
Okay. You don't even know
I don't
yet.
remember what it was.
Thank you for trusting me. In terms of technical innovation or storytelling techniques, what boundaries are you excited to see being pushed or broken in the film industry today?
Earlier tonight, Nika talked about some of the virtual production that is happening, and I think that's really exciting. And I get to work in animation a lot, and I think that that's a medium that a lot of filmmakers, especially those of us that are in West Virginia and we don't maybe have access to some of these really cutting-edge technologies, is exciting, and it's accessible to us. We can do this. We can access these things, and we can compete with the world in these ways. And I think that a lot of folks are afraid of artificial intelligence, and we think about like, how are we going to use these programs as a tool and not something that takes away from our capacity as humans to create art. And I would urge you not to fear that and think of it more as a tool than something that is going to destroy your career. In my industry, we are seeing some growing pains. I don't think they're permanent. So when Jonathan and I with Coat of Arms are creating animation, there are areas where we're seeing a sliding of like, okay, we're losing some of the Adobe Premiere or Adobe products not being as strong as they could be compared to Unreal Engine and things like that. But I think that if we're willing and able and open to bringing in the experts and surrounding ourselves with these experts, we can create beautiful art and still compete with the computer. But I think all of these individuals right here are demonstrating that you don't have to, story is first. And that will, if you anchor yourself to that first, then you're going to build the craft that you want. And I think that is where I would, if I were a young filmmaker, I would start there. Something that focuses on making sure that you get your acts and your story right before you start trying to integrate too much technology and modern innovations.
Thank you. Jillian, do you have something to add?
You guys can still clap for her. I think that something that really innovated my process was COVID. And so I hadn't made anything in probably like 5 years. I think there's this time period once you graduate your undergrad, especially if you go to film school and you've had all these deadlines and you've had all these reasons to make stuff, and then you're into the workforce, you have to learn how to be an adult, you have to learn all these different things, and there's just it gets harder to make stuff, and you're maybe not in a community that is making stuff. And that kind of happened for me, like in my first internship, like being in corporate entertainment, like I didn't have a community that was making stuff. I came home during 2020 and worked remotely, and that's when I started making more Shine on West Virginia videos and getting integrated more into the arts community and the film community here, and people were just making stuff for fun again. And that's when I started doing that, and Caden Tooley was very inspirational to me in that, where he was like, let's just make something. And so I think being in the West Virginia community was great. But then going back to LA, I was like, well, I have all these ideas, especially nonfiction ideas. How do I do that? Oh, well, during COVID, I was doing my interviews on Zoom. Okay, I guess I can still wake up early before I go to work at Disney, because it's still kind of early on this end too, do an interview, get dressed, go to work. And so that was kind of how I made a bunch of those Shine on West Virginia videos. Now, is it the preferred method to not be there, to not see screen? No, but I've been able to really build a community around me that I trust to make those videos and to show me visuals. And so, you know, with my current documentary projects, I may not always be here, but I've found a way to do that. And then just to flip this question a bit too, I love the innovations, but I also love the traditional methods and means. Working at Disney, obviously we're a CG studio now, but one of the best kept secrets is we still have a hand-drawn department. And one of the proudest things that I've been able to do is be the sole production support with a producer who has been at Disney for 40 plus years, and having her mentor me on hand-drawn animation has just been amazing. And so if you've seen Donald Duck on Hot Ones, that was my whole spring and summer, and it was really cool because most of it was on paper and hand-drawn, and so like I think there's always going to be an appetite for those traditional methods as well.
Thank you. This is not a prepared question, and this is just like coming from my brain, so watch out. But I do social media for a living, and I watch a lot of TikTok for my livelihood and also my enjoyment. And I was just wondering, like, as you're making films, like even traditional methods or waking up and Zooming, you know, how does the social media video landscape like change what you all do, and how can you like break the boundaries, you know, in like a tech world where like it's quick video and it's, you know, people like me who have 10-second attention spans. How do you break through and tell impactful stories and get people to, you know, really latch on to those? Because you all have done it effectively, in my opinion. I've seen all of your movies. Hi.
Okay, so I'll speak to something. We make a lot of short videos because attention spans are very horrendous right now. All y'all got to get better attention spans. So I do believe that if we're able, again, going back to story, if you can anchor to authentic and meaningful content, and even if you can, if you had, let's challenge ourselves to tell something in 1 minute. Do your elevator pitch. Do your, you know, all these little things. I think you'll realize that yes, we have short attention spans, but that's a fun challenge. That's a really cool challenge, and it's hard. But the more you hone that craft, the better you are going to be at long-form storytelling, which is really important for humans. Humans have, for millennia, sat around campfires, dinner tables, and you know, in community settings, and they've told each other stories. And that's so important, so we can't lose the long form, but I would suggest that you challenge yourself to the short form, because it's gonna, I think personally for me, it has given me the confidence to dabble and create long-form videos.
I will test this mic every time, so I don't talk into it. I agree with this, like trying to tell a story in a short amount of time. So I have a few students in the crowd, or alumni in the crowd, which is awesome, by the way. I love that stuff. Oh, there they are. There they are. And in class, it's interesting because you do think, it's like, oh, short attention span. And then you give a student a task like, okay, you get to write a 2-page script. It's like, oh no, this story, it takes so many twists and turns. I need more pages. I'm like, no. It is that practice of telling something in a short amount of time. And so, I don't know. It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that yeah, we're watching things that are really quick, but yet when it comes to like telling the story, it's almost this practice in telling it quickly, which is fun. I don't know. Now I'm thinking of other projects, of course, to try in class. But I do tell students with TikTok, we're doing research, we're trying to find stories. I know when I'm scrolling on it for work also, like Alex, sometimes you'll scroll on when you're like, oh my gosh, this could be a film, because there's so many stories out there, and it's a place where everyone, or anyone can really share anything. And so some of them, it's just like maybe told in a minute. You're like, oh, that could be a film. Like, what is going on with this person and like this research? So I do encourage students to absorb that because you're getting research everywhere. Like one of the projects is go, in class, go sit outside for 10 minutes and just listen, write down all the details of what you hear, like who's a character that maybe walks by and and then like that's part of the research, or utilizing technology and TikTok to maybe find those stories. And so it's a little different, but it's still utilizing that like fast-paced, like, attention span, but to maybe then expand on that for story as well.
Can I add something? Yeah. Once you get that like hit of that's a cool story, then delete the app and don't look at it. I'm like, I hate to be the Luddite, but I think I made my most creative, most gratifying work for the 3 years I deleted social media. And that may be a controversial thing, but in terms of it finding inspiration, I totally do. But then we know that in these departments that like create the social media, the goal is not for just us to be inspired, but for us to feel like we're not doing enough, or to keep looking for more. And I think it's a really valuable, it's almost like sitting at a diner, like all the diners are closed. So like sitting at the diner and looking through Instagram and finding that and being like, that's so beautiful, that's a moment. Then put it down and write, get pen and paper and write, right? And so I think there's a balance that everybody needs to strike that's actually very difficult because most of them are designed to keep us wanting to look for more rather than savoring that moment. So it's kind of the opposite of like my role as a documentary filmmaker is a very slow process. It takes years. And it's a lot of boringness, when I was teaching, my students didn't have a high tolerance for boringness. And I think that's a product of being used to it's like I have a 3-year-old and he gets in the car and he tells me the song he wants to hear. And I'm like, no, we're gonna listen to the radio. Because I'm like trying to remind him that like an on-demand life is not normal all the time, right? So I don't want to sound like a Luddite because it is a wonderful resource. But I think we have to like be aware that it can make us make carbon copies of each other and ourselves, and like it's a very interesting like thing to balance in your life as an artist.
And just to add, I think one thing about TikTok and short form content that it's taught me is not to be a perfectionist, because I definitely am. And some of the stuff that goes viral is so like poorly shot, or like this style of like just having this, everybody's graphics look exactly the same. And at first when I got on the app, I was like, this is crazy that like this quality is going viral. But then it kind of linked back to me that like in film school, so many people just didn't finish their films because they were still toying with it, they were still fixing it, and then life happens and you don't finish it. And so for me, it was always important, like, no, let's just get it like done. Let's get it out there and get on to the next thing. Like this short doc, there's still things that I watch in it and I'm like, oh, I could toy with that or fix that, and I just had to tell myself to like stop and go forward.
I'd like to open it up to more questions from the audience, though I could ask you all questions all day. I will if you want. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask our panelists today? You can step up to the stairs. I'll start calling you by name. I won't do that. Chris White? Dave Lavender? Let's get the men up here. Thank you.
My question is more of a comment. I'm just kidding. I would never do that to you. Jeez. And I'm going to speak for 20 minutes. I don't have a question. I have so many thoughts. Like, you guys are making me think things. So I have no questions. You're answering them by spinning my brain. But I am going to hold the microphone for people who do have questions. Thank you, Alex.
Here comes somebody.
Yeah, I'm Jolene's husband, but I don't have a question for her. My question's for Tisha. I'm just curious, you see some of your students out in the audience, and you've now been developing the film program long enough to kind of really see some people go all the way through it. What do you see as the biggest needs of your students post-graduation? Like, what resources do you wish they had here, maybe, that maybe they don't, or maybe they do, and everybody has all the resources they need? But, yeah.
Thank you. That's a good question. I think, I mean, they could also speak up. I am curious. I know I've been in talks with folks about having a mentorship program, and I think Sam has talked with my co-filmmaker, Patrick Ward Perkins, who I just finished this last film with, and who's willing to, spend 20 years in the industry to talk with students as they graduate, because there is this space, like you said, okay, well, I finished, I don't have deadlines, how are you able to continue that creative process without falling into, oh, right, well, we still have to make money because that's how we live. And so I think, I don't know, I feel like the industry is growing here in West Virginia, and of course, Dave could speak much more to that. I feel like recently, so I keep all of my, because there's not a ton of students yet, right? So my alumni are all in this Instagram chat once they graduate, and it's just putting job opportunities in there. And I feel like it's more consistent now because there are films coming in. Luckily, we have our tax incentive back, thanks to folks who work to get that done. And so there are these opportunities happening. But I think, having an equipment rental house would be really helpful in West Virginia. And what else? More funding for the arts. I mean, that's always a conversation.
More
to
nonprofit
have, right?
fiscal sponsors so we can apply for funding.
Yeah.
You can't even
absolutely.
apply for grants without a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. And yeah, it's a barrier for West Virginia artists to be able to apply for the West Virginia Humanities Grant, because they have to have a West Virginia-based nonprofit. And a lot of nonprofits haven't been a fiscal sponsor before.
Yep. So that's, it usually always comes down to funding, honestly. Yeah.
Money.
Money.
Thank you, Tisha.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
I have a question for everybody you can answer, but from an Appalachian perspective, what are some boundaries that you feel need to be broken as filmmakers? And that can be from a story perspective, or that can be from an industry perspective. But I'm interested because there's a really good mix of Appalachians that have moved away, Appalachians that are still here. And so you hear a lot of talk about the region and the stories that aren't being told. But from your perspective, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I feel it's such a big region, and anytime I've tried to organize filmmakers in the region, the needs of those in Appalachia, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, the needs there are so different than the needs where Clara lives in Helvetia, West Virginia, right? And so it's so difficult to organize, and you find that across the South too. It's the resources are so different based on where we are. I just think there needs to be this, what you guys have created here, where it's camaraderie, there's support, there's crew calls. How can we support one another? Sometimes I hear about jobs that I can't take, and I pass them on to other people. I ask them often, do you have a graphic designer I can use? So the communication side of it, a long time ago, it was maybe like 10 years ago, I started this crowdsourced Creatives in Appalachia spreadsheet. And like people still add their name to it, and I kind of forgot about it until recently. And that's a very useful thing, like having a database. I mean, where I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee right now, the state of Tennessee has a database of crew. And it's easily searchable. You can find out what gear they have and everything. And so like having the sort of infrastructure so that people aren't flying in crew from elsewhere, and that we have people that are trained here. You know, I would love to get some funding to bring some really good sound recordists and do like boot camp to get more, even like high school seniors. I mean, a sound recordist per day on a documentary film could get paid $650 a day. You don't need a college degree for that. You just need to have good ears and like an interest in people. And so I think that entertainment is a huge part of the economy. It's often belittled in a state like West Virginia that is very dependent on our land as our money, whether it's coal, oil, and gas. And so these things feel very fluffy and not real, but it's a massive economy. And so I think just the infrastructure building, which takes time, and the buy-in, and we're storytellers. This whole region is full of storytelling. And to your earlier question of something I'm excited about, breaking boundaries, is I'm really excited about the blur between documentary and fiction, like bringing in the old ballads that we know and fables and stories that we all grew up telling, and how can those influence our real stories of today to help us reimagine stories. And that feels very true to who we are, like our Liars contest. And like there's so much here. So I think it's just honing it all and getting people to collaborate and support one another. And you guys are doing that here. So you guys, you're doing it.
The boundaries that I feel are painful. Like, it is so, and I don't know if it's that where I'm choosing to live and what I'm choosing to focus on, but like, for example, there's a story, and a lot of folks use this analogy in order to demonstrate what we do in community development and restoration of our communities and healing our communities, where there's a river full of babies and we're just pulling the babies out over and over and over again. And we're never looking upstream to see where those babies are going in the river. And I currently feel like I'm pulling babies out of the river all the time, and it's hard. And so, and I don't know if that's something that culturally we have developed that resilience in West Virginia and in Appalachia, that's the way we have to approach our lives and our livelihood. But it's not fair. It's really not fair. And I could move. I could live somewhere else where I'm maybe a little less connected to my community, and perhaps have better resources, public services like schooling and transportation, and I'm not drinking water that's dirty or breathing in bad chemicals or whatever it is. But those are things that we're facing. And I'm still trying to make films. I'm still trying to run a business. I'm still trying to raise a family here because I love this place, and we all do, and you all do. I know you do. But that's a huge boundary that's really difficult, and I don't know the answer except for all of us banding together and continuing to say it's not fair, it's not right, and we're not going to stand for it.
I think the boundary for me is a little bit different and a little bit more abstract, because I think growing up I felt like I had a lot of boundaries here and didn't have like a lot of what we've echoed of like having access to a film community outside of maybe just yourself. And it really just came, like breaking that boundary really just came from talking to people and talking about what I wanted to do a lot, like maybe too much, like way too much. And that's what got me my job at Disney. Like if you would have told me that my job at Disney was coming from a West Virginia connection, I would have thought you were crazy. But for those of you who don't know, it totally did. It came through a connection of my mom's through the newsroom in the 80s. And that person had moved to California and was working in Disney's marketing department. And like, that was the start. And that came from me babbling on about being super excited and loving Disney and wanting to have a career in film. And so I think sometimes we think there are boundaries that are there that maybe aren't if we just put ourselves out there. Like, you just have to be a little delusional and really try hard to just kind of believe that maybe it's possible. And that's, yeah, you may think there's a boundary there that may not always be there.
So I am a self-taught filmmaker. Unfortunately, I didn't have a Tisha to guide me to school. But I am completely self-taught. I opened a nonprofit to help others to learn and develop as filmmakers. We've got the biggest film festivals in the world represented on the stage here. So, like, what do you guys think is the difference that new filmmakers can do for those Sundances, those Tribecas, those South by Southwests? You know, what's the thing that kind of keeps, that filmmakers can do, whether it's pre-production, editing, whatever, you know, what can be done as a whole?
I've not had a film in any of those festivals.
I'll just say one thing real quick, and then I'm going to let Elaine speak to this too. But I think that it's a mystery how film festivals select films. I am so confused by it sometimes. And I will admit that you're going to get there and you'll be like, oh, I got my film done. I'm so excited. I'm finished. And you're going to start submitting. You think $20. I can do that. Like $20? Okay, $50. Okay, the submission fees over and over and over, right? And then you're going to realize, lo and behold, your film's really quality, and it's just as good as the other films that are getting into these festivals. But there are themes that some of these festivals have, and they don't tell you when you apply. Or they're regional. This film festival in particular is very transparent about that. But it's very hard, and I think sometimes what you'll focus on is you think that is the end game. Like, you'll think, okay, if I get into that festival, I'm successful. And then you're gonna realize there's another level up, and then there's another one and another one. And you're never gonna reach it, so you have to satisfy yourself with your story and what makes you happy and is meaningful to you, because it's a very, very difficult boundary for me personally, I feel, to get past. But I don't know if that answered your question, but I'm gonna let Elaine talk next.
It's a really difficult thing to talk to young filmmakers about, because the reality is I have no clue how King Cole got into Sundance, but I do think I have a clue about 3 things that helped, because there were just as many good films that were just as good as King Cole that didn't get in. And those 3 things were, I applied for a grant from Sundance and got an early development grant. There are pipelines that lead to film festivals. Film festivals that are established, like Sundance, Tribeca, Hot Docs, they're just there to take your money, and they will take as many submissions as they want, and they're happy to take 1% of those submissions, and then your money has been funded to let others drink freely at the film festival you can't attend. It's a pretty corrupt system, and the pipeline sometimes is more clear when you get a grant, in which then the Sundance Development Grant then puts you in the radar of the Sundance Film Festival. But I still don't think King Cole would have gotten into Sundance had I not had 2 producers on my film who had previously premiered 2 films at Sundance the year before. So it is a lot of who you know. And that's where the balancing act of your film needs to be quality, obviously. It needs to have your heart in it. You need to have done what needs to be done to make it the best film you could have made. But then you need to support yourself, especially if you're from West Virginia or Appalachia and you're not working cocktail parties at LA and New York all the time, to have people that are in those circles, that support you and that are genuine people. And my producers are amazing, lovely people that worked on King Cole. But that helped a lot, because they know the programmers. I can't write a programmer individually. I don't know them, right? They could write the programmer and say, we submitted it, just wanted to flag it. Well, they had 2 films that premiered the year before that were a great success. Of course the programmers are going to watch it, right? So there's all these little things that people don't tell you. Same with like winning an Emmy Award or a Peabody Award. You nominate yourself. A lot of people don't know that. You know, the Peabody Award costs like $500 to nominate yourself. The Emmy Award, the same thing. You know, just this year, I got asked to be part of the Academy, and I'll be screening Oscar films. And I'm really excited to be on to know what that's like, because my experience with Heroin, which was nominated for an Oscar, was we made that film with a $90,000 grant, and then my guess from the publicists, we had 4 publicists on that film once Netflix bought it, and they told me that the range of marketing publicity was $250,000 to $500,000. We made the film for $90,000, and that was for over a year of filming. And that wasn't just paid to us, that was paid to people to make it, color, sound, everything, right? So it's like, there's a whole working in the industry, and it's really important that we're aware of that, and we decide which parts we're going to tug the levers on. Saving up money for a publicist, definitely worth your money. So it's all been very eye-opening to me. Like going to Sundance, the publicists, I learned you can't have a publicist at Sundance unless you pay them $10,000. They're not guaranteed to get you any press, but you've got to pay that money. And it's, we had to take out a loan. When we finished the film, we had to take out a loan from the investor just to go to Sundance, because they only pay you $500 for your film to show there. And to stay in Park City for 10 days is more than $500. So I don't mean to sound cynical, but I don't know that it's the goal to be like, I'm going to make a film that Sundance they're going to love this, because you're going to be disappointed. You need to make a film that you love, that you're passionate about. And I think what's more important, that's something that I'm learning now that I've totally missed, is you need to be building your own audience, however way you can do that. And that starts with your own community. It starts with your parents and your parents' friends and the people that are supporting you now. Start a newsletter, gather their emails, let them know what you're doing, because that's the people that want to see your work. You can't ever rely on Sundance and all the nonsense I just explained, all those doors to work for someone to see your film. I'm skeptical they can't watch that many submissions. Like, I've tweeted that before, and that wasn't a popular tweet. But I think it's important that we don't get caught up in trying to please someone else in making that work.
You said that you're now a voting member of the Academy. Okay, for those of you who don't know, that's a really stinking big deal, so I think you should. She's talking about the Academy that puts on the Oscars. She's on the voting body. That's not something that everybody gets. Clap for her.
I think also, not to be a weird gender girl, but when I just see a professional group of filmmakers talking about, no, there's work involved, and there's money, and there's making connections, and it's emotional labor and physical labor and mental labor. Obviously you all, I'm preaching to the choir as filmmakers here, but as creatives in general, I think we sort of just can skate past that in our minds. We're oh, we have a great story and here it should be. But I don't know, I'm just starstruck by all 4 of you, and I had Jill in my car. Yes, I'm still it's crazy. But
she saw me without makeup on.
And I thought she was great. But it's just, I don't know. I think that's really special. As a creative, I don't get to hear a lot of people talk about the logistics, and I think that's just really special.
And just to kind of bounce off what you just said too, I think for a couple of years was oh, I'm a production coordinator. I'm very good at production. So for those of you who don't know, I don't animate, I don't draw, I don't do CG. I help tell those people what to do and manage their schedules and the people management. And so I kind of put myself in a box where I was this is nice and comfortable. I don't need to make films anymore. That's too hard. That's too gray area. And once I started making films again, it was okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. And so I put on coffees with a ton of different female filmmakers and stuff, how do you do it? And they're oh, I have a day job. And I was oh, but no, I have a day job. It's being a filmmaker is not a full-time job until you get really lucky and make it a full-time job. And even then, it's, I don't know, I moonlight. I do this, I work all day from 9 to 6, and then I come home and make myself work on stuff. And so it's not glamorous at all. A lot of people, in order to get to this point, you have to pretty much work 2, 3, 4 jobs.
It's not glamorous, she says, wearing a sequined outfit. Okay, Barbie, okay. I don't know how much time we have, but I have a question that I'm just curious about, if that's okay with everyone. Jeff's not jumping around saying stop talking. Okay, I'm doing it. I'm asking my last question. Just like thinking about the body of work represented, like with Heroine and like O Pioneer and all of the things like Zane and Her Hope Haven. These are breaking boundaries, not in just like who's making them or where they're being made, but also the things they're about, right? Like those aren't stories that get told every day. Not all of those people get represented on camera all the time. And I wondered if you could just talk about that. Like, how do you land on a story that you feel needs to be told, even if it might not be the story that everyone wants to hear? Could you talk about that? Tisha.
It's a good question. I think, I talk about this in class, like you have to be passionate about it, right? Like whatever story that you want to tell. And we've talked about that up here where you may not have all the resources, you may not have all the funding, you may not have all the networking and all of these things. And so you're doing something that you care about. Like Elaine said, it's like something a story that you want to tell. And I think that's really an important part of it. I know for me, the work that I'm making most recently, like it's so based in place in West Virginia. Like I said, when I left here when I was younger and I lived in LA for a bit, and I knew the stories I wanted to tell didn't take place there, and so I wanted to move home, and I also wanted to teach, which is why I also came back home. And I think that, for me, I come from like this teaching space of like write what you know. And although that is not required or necessary or, how all films should be made at all, that's how I learned. And so I've kind of used that. And that was part of like coming back and telling these stories. And so I think that's a huge part of why I tell the stories that I do. And I really hope, and I say this often, and my students out there, they've heard me say this, like making work that can make a difference. Like that's the goal that I often have, not always, but if someone can watch a film and they think differently about the human condition or just respecting people and loving people because we're all people and we're human, I think that's one of the goals that I have with my work, is to highlight a story that maybe doesn't get the representation that it deserves, and trying to include the people who are of that world, like with Her Hope Haven, that's set in a recovery center, a women's recovery center. And so casting women who are in recovery was like a really important part. And like, yeah, it's not a huge successful like project, but
It's huge to me.
Well,
It
thank
was
you,
really
Alex.
cool.
But the process, I'm all about process. Like making the thing is really, I think, such an important part of it for me. Now that's different for everybody, but for me it is about that making. Luckily, because film festivals, I hit like 2 out of 30 like with my last film, and that's fine. But I love making films, and so I think again it just goes back to having that passion of the story that you want to tell is important for the work I make, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, I would just add that we all have antennas. Sometimes, like, you may not be paying attention, but if you start paying attention, you'll see what grabs your attention. And if you're if you're a writer, if you're a filmmaker, it doesn't matter the medium. If you start writing down when your antenna goes up, or like when something catches your ear, and you write it down, just do that for a month, you'll see patterns in stories and themes and plot and character. They're like, oh, I'm tending to go towards, David and Goliath type stories, or I'm tending to go towards an underdog, I'm tending to go towards villain, whatever it is. Like, and then immerse yourself in films, watch films. Like, if you're gonna make films, watch them, see all the magic that's been made, and not just new films, old films. And then there's that moment of like, oh, how can I personally add to this? Which is when it gets really complicated and rich and lovely. But everything Tisha said is right. It pretty much starts with following something that's calling you, and generally it doesn't have to turn into a personal film because of that, but it needs to be calling you personally. And sometimes it's good to just make something and throw it away, like Jillian said, right? Like, don't be precious about it. Give yourself a constraint. Creative constraints are really important. Like, I'm only going to shoot this film in 24 hours. I'm only going to shoot this film on a tripod. I'm only going to shoot this film on my iPad. sorry, iPad. Do people do that? My iPhone. Whatever it is, like only going to shoot this at night. Whatever it is, give yourself a creative constraint and make something. And it's less scary. Like don't make it scary. Yeah, I don't even know what the question is or why I'm talking. Do you want this?
You answered it. So inspiration is so beautiful and so annoying, and and when it strikes, sometimes it's like, oh, I feel it like all through my body, like it's just like and you can't get away from it. And so generally, if something is resonating, I try to really listen, like Elaine was saying, and then if it's still good in the morning, then you chase it. I get inspired at night at like 2 a.m. all the time, and then I think it's a dumb idea the next day, and so then I throw it away. But O Pioneer was one of those moments for me where I was literally meditating, and I had a full body experience of exhilaration and knew that I had to do it. And then for Born in a Ballroom, it was, I had started, it first was, I was writing what I thought was a kind of a memoir, and it turned into, Jonathan was like, let's make it a movie, a documentary. And it's about my grandmother and her restaurant in the small village I live in. And so some of these things just line up, and slowly they morph and transform over time, and whatever the medium is that you study it doesn't matter. I think that you just have to start somewhere, and if it's in painting or writing or a speech or in, like Elaine said, just like on your iPhone, then that's where you start. And then if it's good, you're gonna know. You're just gonna feel it, and you're gonna know it's bigger, or maybe it's smaller, but it's unique. Our little series called Lullaby Theories started out as an idea of just how important science is to our women. Like, we need more women in science. We need to make sure that we celebrate women in science. And my 2 little girls are identical twins. I thought, how sweet would it be to make science and theories approachable through the voices of these little girls that I adore. And so we wrote a whole bunch of little episodes and just made them into something that was approachable for children and women. And I think you got to start somewhere and then just chase it. And eventually you're going to have so many poker chips on the table that you're going to have to stick with it. And that's a good thing. So don't give up.
I think for me, like, the inspiration's always super personal, and then when you start to share it with others, I think feedback is really, really important, and it's really, really hard. I will cry all the time about it, but then you take a second, humble yourself, and you say, okay, maybe they're right, or maybe this does need to be cut, or maybe this doesn't work. And sometimes the feedback you get is essentially like, scrap the whole thing, and you're like, okay, well, we're not doing that, but you still learn through that feedback, right? So the feedback I got on Zane from other trusted filmmakers, some of it was insight into how I'm making this next one, and so you get better with every film as long as you're listening to the feedback and taking the critique, depending on what you want to do, right? Like, if you do want to be mainstream Hollywood, then you're going to have to listen to the critique of people who understand that world. You just have to humble yourself a little bit, and it's really hard. And every time that you show something, at least for me, I'm still like, oh God, I hope people like it. But at the end of the day, I know that the way that I made Zane is the way that I would have made Zane. And if people don't like it, or if there's notes, I'll listen to them and hear it. Not the person, the movie. If you don't like Zane the person, what are you doing? And so, yeah, just opening yourself up to feedback and critique is really scary, but a huge part of the process.
Those are all the questions we have time for, but our takeaways are: find your passion, don't be afraid to listen to other people, and if you're scared to get on stage and ask questions to people who make stuff that you like, You should do it anyway, but you should put deodorant on first. I wish I had done that. Guys, let's give a round of applause to all our talented filmmakers.